Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is the show where we take that big pile of sources. You've got articles, notes, maybe some research, and we really try to pull out the key insights. You know that feeling when you're sort of wading through everything, trying to find the core idea, and you just wish there was a quicker way to get properly informed. Well, that's what we do here. And today we're doing a deep dive into something I think every storyteller thinks about, whether you're writing a novel or making a film. It's the art and science of the perfect opening scene. We've got a really great stack of sources today. Screenwriting guides, narrative theory, all sorts of things that really unpack what makes an audience, sit up and pay attention right from the very first second.
It is fascinating, isn't it, how much really hinges on those first few moments. Our sources all seem to point to this. Whether it's a book or a movie, that opening carries so much weight. And this dive, it isn't just about common mistakes or what not to do. It actually gives some really concrete strategies, different types of openings that can really grab you. We'll explore why those first impressions are just so critical, how they set the stage, introduce characters, and really how they invite you, the audience, into this whole new world. Our goal here is to pull out those nuggets that show how the masters reel you in, hook, line, and sinker right from the start.
Okay, let's unpack that. The sources keep saying opening scenes do a lot of heavy lifting. It's not just a starting point, is it? It's like the audience's first real taste of the world you've built.
Exactly. Heavy lifting is a good way to put it. One source, New 32 Productions, they point out that openings usually introduce the main character, the setting, maybe hint at the plot, but it's absolute core job. Keep the audience interested enough to stick around. It's the gateway, so it absolutely has to be compelling.
Right, like that first impression really counts.
It's make or break. If it doesn't grab you, you're out.
It sounds like there's just immense pressure then on those first few minutes or pages. Why is it so crucial to nail it right away?
Well, think about it. Bridget LaMonica, she's a cinematographer, she calls that first scene and even the first shot in film prime real estate. If you're not hooked almost instantly, modern audiences. Well, we're impatient, aren't we? There's always something else to watch, something else to read. We'll just bail.
Yeah, the next thing is just a click away.
Exactly. And K.M. Weiland makes a great point, too. If the beginning isn't right, it doesn't matter how amazing the rest of the story is. Nobody will ever get there. They won't read it. They won't watch it. Which leads to the big question, really. What is it that audiences are actually looking for in those first moments?
Good question. The sources talk about the opening scene being like a promise, or maybe an agreement with the audience. What does that mean exactly for you, the listener?
That promise idea is key. It basically means the opening scene signals what the rest of the story is going to be like. It sets the tone, the genre, the overall feel. So, if it's meant to be scary, you need a hint of fear right up front. If it's a comedy, you should probably laugh or at least smile pretty early on.
Okay, so it manages expectations.
Precisely. It makes a promise that the rest of the story is going to deliver on. That way, you avoid alienating the audience, especially if the story takes unexpected turns later. You need that initial trust.
Right, you don't want to promise one thing and deliver something totally different.
Exactly. Consistency is key for keeping that trust.
So if the opening is this promise, how do you make sure that promise is, captivating? Greenlight coverage mentions creating a strong hook. What does that really entail? Is it just about being loud or shocking?
Not necessarily loud or shocking, no. A strong hook, as they describe it, is more about enticing you, like a book you just can't put down. It's fundamentally about creating curiosity, deep curiosity. And you can do that in a few ways. Maybe start with something really unexpected or thought-provoking, or introduce some subtle conflict that hints at bigger stakes down the line.
Okay, so raising questions in the audience's mind.
Exactly. Posing questions without giving immediate answers. It makes you lean in. Think about the opening of Inception. It just drops you right into this confusing, watery scene. It's not just action, it's a puzzle. It builds complexity and intrigue right from the get-go, making you ask, what on earth is happening here?
That makes sense. It's not just curiosity, though, is it? These sources also really emphasize setting the mood or the vibe immediately.
Yeah.
That seems so intangible. How do you actually do that?
It is intangible, but it's crafted very deliberately. An effective opening signals the world's rules, its emotional temperature. Visual cues are huge, obviously. Dark, moody colors for thrillers, maybe bright palettes for comedies.
Right, you instantly get a feel for the genre.
You do. And sound is crucial, too. The very first notes of a score can set a suspenseful mood, or an uplifting one, before any dialogue. Think of the Jaws theme, 2 notes, instant dread.
Yeah, iconic.
And pacing matters too. Fast cuts might suggest action, adventure. Slower, more deliberate scenes might lean towards drama. The Grand Budapest Hotel is a great example. The colors, the quirky humor, the music, it all instantly tells you what kind of whimsical world you're entering.
Visuals really do seem massive here, especially for film. Painting that picture without words. How do they work to pull us in?
Well, they're often the very first impression, aren't they? The setting itself can tell a story. A one downtown might suggest history, secrets. A sterile futuristic city might suggest control, or maybe dystopia.
So the setting isn't just a backdrop.
Not at all. It reflects themes, character. Lighting and color, too, they evoke emotion. Warm light might feel nostalgic. Cold blue light might feel isolating. Green light coverage calls this the visual masterpiece opening. Think of Lord of the Rings. Those epic landscapes immediately scream grand adventure. Or Taxi Driver, that gritty, rain-soaked cityscape tells you everything about the mood and the world. The setting is a storyteller.
Okay, and conflict. We know conflict drives story. The sources say it needs to be there from the start, even if it's subtle. How do you manage that without just starting with a fight?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a massive fight. Subtle conflict works wonders. Even just a tense glance between characters or a slightly barbed comment during a conversation, it plants a seed. The key is introducing something that matters to the characters, their goals, their relationships, maybe a secret. That implies consequences if things don't get resolved. It hooks into our need for resolution.
Like in Jaws, you mentioned that earlier. We don't see the shark, but the danger is immediate.
Exactly. The music, the unseen threat, the victim's reaction, it creates intense conflict and dread without showing the monster right away. It's about suggesting the stakes.
And dialogue. How does that function effectively in an opening, beyond just giving information?
Opening dialogue needs to be sharp, purposeful. Every line should ideally do double duty, advance the plot, and reveal character or world details. K.M. Wayland calls dialogue the purest form of showing, not telling. It creates immediacy. When characters talk, you see their dynamics, their power struggles, their personalities in action.
Like the opening of Pulp Fiction.
Perfect example. Jules and Vincent just talking about burgers and foot massages tells you so much about them, their relationship, their world, before any real plot kicks in. Every line has to add value, create intrigue, or show that spark of humanity. No wasted words.
Okay, so beyond the visuals and the words, there's sound. The music, the effects. How critical are those in hooking us?
Oh, they're critical. The unsung heroes, really. Sound and music transform everything. They add layers of emotion, anticipation. A single violin note can make you feel sadness. Bustling city noise instantly sets a location and mood.
And musical cues for characters.
Yeah, definitely. A specific theme can introduce a character, hint at their personality. Darth Vader's theme, for instance. Subtle sound design can foreshadow events, too, adding depth. A ticking clock, maybe? It's amazing how much a single sound can make you feel. It bypasses the conscious mind sometimes.
So the opening sets the tone, introduces characters, conflict, but also theme. The deeper message. How do you weave that in early without being too, obvious or preachy?
That's the trick. It needs to be subtle, organic. The theme shouldn't be stated outright, but it should emerge naturally from the action, the setting, the character's initial situation. Maybe a character makes a small moral choice that hints at larger questions the story will explore.
Like a symbolic action.
Exactly. Or a recurring image, a motif. Something that plants a seed of the story's core idea. It provides a lens for interpreting everything that follows, but it shouldn't feel like a lesson. It has to feel part of the story's fabric.
You mentioned audience impatience earlier. How does pacing fit into crafting that compelling opening? Is faster always better?
Not necessarily faster, but definitely getting to the point quickly. Bridget LaMonica stresses this: audiences don't want long, drawn-out setups. You need to get to the meat of the matter fairly fast. Now, some stories use slow burns effectively, building dread slowly. But even those need an immediate hook, something to grab you while the pace builds.
So even a slow burn needs an initial spark.
Precisely. The opening needs to capture attention and then sustain it, setting the rhythm for the whole narrative. Whether that rhythm is fast or slow, it has to be engaging from moment one.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly to characters. They seem absolutely central to making an opening work. Why is introducing them well so vital?
Well, K.M. Weiland argues, and I think convincingly, that for maybe 90% of stories, starting with character is your best bet. Because we connect with characters, they're our way into the story, our avatars, especially in books, where you don't have those immediate visual hooks of film. Connecting with the protagonist is crucial before you even really get into the plot.
They need to be the main hook themselves.
Absolutely. The protagonist should be your single greatest hook. If we don't care about who this is happening to, why would we care what is happening?
So how do you do that effectively right away? The sources mentioned this idea of a characteristic moment. What is that?
It's a great concept. A characteristic moment is basically the first scene where we see the protagonist in action doing something. And it's designed specifically to show us who they are, their personality, their skills, their flaws, without just telling us. Crucially, it shows why they're interesting enough to follow. And it shouldn't feel random. It needs to feel like the first natural step, the first domino that leads into the main story.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine a spy meticulously preparing a complex gadget before a mission. It shows their precision, maybe their paranoia, their skills, all through action. That's a characteristic moment.
Makes sense. And it's not just about the main character in isolation, right? Relationships seem important too.
Oh, definitely. Introducing important relationships early, even secondary ones, adds instant dynamism. More characters means dialogue, which we said is great for showing. It allows for conflict, banter, revealing power dynamics, think cop buddies, rival siblings, awkward first dates. These interactions show characters reacting to others, which often reveals more than just seeing them alone. And ideally, these early interactions hint at bigger relationship dynamics to come.
And how does this initial introduction connect to the character's whole journey, their arc?
This is where it gets really interesting. That characteristic moment, it doesn't just show who they are now, it lays the groundwork for their entire transformation. Character arcs are often about overcoming some internal lie, a flawed belief, and embracing a truth. The opening should show the character living according to that lie. Maybe it served them once, but now it's starting to cause problems, feel uncomfortable.
So you establish their starting point, their internal conflict.
Exactly. You dramatize their relationship with that internal flaw. That creates an inner tension, a need for change. And that makes the external plot conflict feel much more meaningful because it forces them to confront that inner lie and start evolving. The journey feels earned.
When you talk about characters being in action or in motion in the opening, does that mean it has to be like a big action sequence?
Not at all. Not necessarily a bombastic beginning, as LaMonica calls it. It just means they should be doing something. New 32 Productions warns against starting with someone just waking up or looking in a mirror. Those are usually pretty weak. Instead, show them rushing to work, having an argument, trying to fix something broken.
Even small actions work.
Yes. K.M. Weiland suggests just keeping them moving. Even walking across a room with a purpose is better than sitting still. It energizes the scene, gives more opportunity to show personality through how they move, how they interact with their environment. It makes the world feel alive.
Okay, so beyond these core principles, green light coverage actually lists specific types of openings. Can you walk us through a few of the really effective ones?
Sure, these are like practical templates, which can be super helpful. First, there's the dramatic action start. This is your classic adrenaline rush, a chase, a fight, an escape. Grabs attention immediately, establishes conflict, shows character under pressure. Think Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Right, straight into the action.
Then there's the unexpected twist. Starts with something shocking, or that subverts expectations. Maybe the villain is revealed as the hero, or a disaster hits out of nowhere, creates instant curiosity. Think Poe's Telltale Heart.
Keeps you guessing.
Exactly. The emotional hook aims straight for the heart. A reunion, a goodbye, a moment of vulnerability makes you care immediately. The opening montage in Pixar's Up is a masterclass in this.
Oh yeah, devastatingly effective.
Isn't it? Then the puzzling mystery starts with an enigma, a weird note, a locked room, amnesia. Appeals to our desire to solve things. Memento is a great example.
Makes the audience active participants.
Precisely. The flash forward jumps ahead in time, showing a future crisis or climax. Creates suspense. How did they get there? Sunset Boulevard does this, starting with the narrator dead in a pool.
Sets the stakes high from the start.
Definitely. The backstory drop weaves in crucial past info subtly, through reflection or conversation, without info dumping, gives context without being boring.
A delicate balance, that one.
Very. The philosophical question starts with the big idea, challenging the reader intellectually right away, sets the thematic tone. Blade Runner asking, what is human? For example.
Engages the brain.
And finally, the omniscient overview gives a wide shot of the world or situation before zooming in. Establishes scale, context. Think of a sweeping shot of a fantasy kingdom or a dystopian city, like the Star Wars opening.
Sets the stage on a grand scale.
Exactly. Lots of tools in the toolbox.
One technique that seems to bridge a few of these is in medias res. Sounds a bit academic, but what does it actually mean for an opening?
It just means into the middle of things. Starting the story not at the chronological beginning, but smack dab in the middle of the action or a crucial situation. You bypass the initial setup and then you fill in the backstory gradually through dialogue, flashbacks, whatever fits.
So not starting from the egg, as Horace put it.
Exactly, you nailed the reference. Horace contrasted it with abovo, from the egg, meaning the very beginning. The Iliad starts years into the Trojan War, not with its origins. It's an ancient technique, but incredibly effective today.
Can you give some more examples? How does it look in practice?
Sure. In literature, Homer's Odyssey starts with Odysseus stranded, years after the war, then tells his earlier adventures and flashbacks. Faulkner, Toni Morrison use it a lot. Poe's Telltale Heart, again, starting mid-confession. In film, it's common in film noir, like Crossfire, opening with a murder, then flashing back. The James Bond movies often start mid-action sequence, before the credits.
Right, the pre-title sequence.
Exactly. And Star Wars. A New Hope is technically in medias res because it's episode 4, dropping us into an ongoing war. Superhero films like Deadpool, animated films like A Grave of the Fireflies, lots of examples. It throws you right in and trusts you to catch up.
That sounds perfect for today's audience, wanting that immediate engagement.
It really is. By skipping the slow buildup and starting with something exciting or mysterious, it grabs attention instantly. It creates curiosity about what came before, establishes high stakes, and often makes the story feel more dynamic and unpredictable right from the start.
Okay, these are all great strategies. But what about the common mistakes? The pitfalls writers should avoid when crafting that opening. What are the big no-nos?
Ah, yes, the pitfalls. There are definitely a few common traps. The biggest one is probably too much exposition, the dreaded info dump. Throwing tons of names, places, history at the reader on page 1 is just overwhelming, makes it feel like homework. Information needs to be woven in naturally.
Right, show don't tell applies here too.
Absolutely. Then there's the opposite problem, lack of clarity, being too vague or mysterious. Mystery is good, confusion is bad. If the reader has no idea what's going on, who anyone is, or where they are, they'll just get frustrated and check out. You need some grounding.
Finding that balance.
It's crucial. Also, predictability and cliches. Avoid starting with someone waking up, looking in the mirror, the stuff we've all seen a million times. Try to offer a little surprise, something fresh.
Make it stand out.
Exactly. Another killer is lack of conflict or a slow start focusing on mundane details. If nothing interesting is happening or seems likely to happen, why stick around? There needs to be some tension, some stakes, even if small.
No boring openings.
Please, no. And flat characters. If your protagonist is dull or passive in the opening, it's hard to get invested. They need some spark, some complexity right away.
Makes sense. What else?
Mediocre writing. The opening pages need to be your absolute best writing. Polished, engaging prose, or sharp visual storytelling. It sets the standard for the whole piece. And that brings us to the prologue dilemma. Prologues aren't inherently bad, but they're often misused. Sometimes they're used to create instant tension because the actual first chapter is slow. But that can feel like a bait and switch if the prologue feels disconnected from the main story.
So if you need a prologue, maybe rethink chapter 1.
Often, yes. Ask if that prologue info can be integrated more organically into the main narrative itself. Sometimes the story really does start later than you think.
Okay, so given all the principles, the types, the pitfalls, what are some final practical tips for someone sitting down to actually write or craft that opening scene?
All right, practical takeaways. First, start in the right place, make sure your character is doing something relevant, and try to start close to the inciting incident. Don't make the audience wait too long for the story to really kick off.
Get things moving.
Yep. Second, be specific and show, don't tell. Use vivid sensory details. Show the magic. Don't just say magic exists. Show the tension in the dialogue. Don't just explain the history of the argument.
Immerse the audience.
Exactly. Third, introduce stakes early. Make it clear what's at risk. Why should the audience care about this conflict? Give them a reason.
Make it matter.
Right. Fourth, keep it concise and be prepared to rewrite. Every word counts in an opening. Be ruthless. Cut anything that doesn't serve the story. And accept that beginnings are hard. You'll probably rewrite it many, many times. Don't get too attached to the first draft.
Kill your darlings, as they say.
Sometimes you have to. And finally, understand your audience. Know the genre expectations. Get feedback from people who read or watch that kind of story. Beta readers are invaluable for openings. Do they get hooked? Are they confused? Listen to them.
That all sounds like really solid advice. So it seems whether you're writing the next great novel, a blockbuster screenplay, or, just trying to figure out why some stories grab you instantly, that opening scene is so much more than just a beginning. It's like this carefully built invitation, isn't it? A promise. A tiny version of the whole story to come.
Absolutely. And if you zoom out, mastering the opening is really about understanding human psychology. What hooks us? What keeps our attention? What makes us genuinely invest in a narrative? It's not about a rigid formula, but about thoughtfully applying these principles to create something that resonates, that intrigues, that engages you. Which maybe leaves a question for you, the listener, to mull over. Thinking about all this, what unexpected hook could you use in your next conversation, maybe your next email, your next presentation? How could you immediately capture attention and invite someone into your idea? Something to think about.